Okay, great. Thanks for joining everybody and welcome to our webinar Introduction to SAP for Alteryx Users. I hope you find it useful this afternoon. Before we start, let's just cover off the agenda for the session today. So we're going to do a mix of two things. We're just going to give you a brief overview of the various types of SAP systems, the SAP landscape, and different types of object types that we may want to make use of within Alteryx from SAP. Some of this will be very familiar to some of you, and some of it will be very unfamiliar to probably most of you. So we'll spend a few minutes just covering off some of the basics, and then I'll hand over to Sky Yadav, who's the co-presenter today, and he'll give a demonstration of the Alteryx Connector for SAP, and it'll also try to relate some of what you'll see in an SAP environment to what we see within an Alteryx environment when we're extracting data from various data sources. Okay, and then at the end we'll finish off and I'll just highlight some useful sources for you to use going forward. Okay, so to start with, when I first started working in SAP about 20 odd years ago, there were literally two systems. It was the dying days of a very old product called R2, which is the first piece of software that SAP launched, and it was the migration to a product called SAP R3, which subsequently became a product called SAP ECC, and later SAP ERP, and is now in the process of being transferred or migrated to a solution called SAP S/4HANA. So some of these names you may be familiar with, but nonetheless, there's a very, very wide variety of SAP systems out there. So I want to try and show here a little bit is where we fit in to the mix of SAP and Alteryx, and where we are going to fit in with a mix of SAP and Alteryx. So SAP traditionally has been installed as what we refer to as an on-premise piece of software. So this is a piece of software that is physically installed on hardware within your organization, and then a few years ago, it started being migrated out to hosted. So you may have a third-party hosting partner or outsourcer who actually host that software for you, but nonetheless, it is physically installed somewhere on a machine. And then more recently, SAP have started introducing the idea of a private cloud. So the private cloud is just SAP's version of a hosted outsourced type of environment. And the bulk of the products you'll use today and probably way into the future will be either in one of the on-premise hosted or private cloud environments. So within there, we'll have our core SAP ERP systems. So whether we refer to it as ECC or SAP ERP is essentially the same thing. It's the enterprise resource planning piece of software. In addition to that, there are a number of subsets or similar related integrated products that perform a specific line of business function. So SAP CRM is a traditional on-premise customer relationship management system. SCM relates to supply chain management and includes an application called APO, which is the Advanced Planner Optimization Tool. HCM relates to human capital management, and SRM relates to supplier relationship management. Collectively, these different products were referred to under the banner of an SAP Business Suite application. Now, the nice thing about this is even though they have different functional focuses, the underlying architecture of those products is the same. And then from our perspective, as a vendor that enables data to be extracted from various SAP systems into Alteryx, it provides us a nice touch point, a common way of integrating or interacting with those SAP systems. Also, I don't know how closely any of you work with SAP today, but the word SAP S/4HANA has been bandied around for a little while now. There's certainly a push or a move to migrate customers off of the old SAP ECC or ERP products onto S/4HANA, I think by 2025. But essentially, it performs the same function. Some of the architecture is a little bit different, but it's performing the same fundamental functions as a core SAP ERP system. In addition to that, SAP have done some work in the marketing area. They launched a product a few years ago. The name's changed a few times, but it's now resolved around SAP marketing, nice and simple. And these products are similarly built on the same architecture as the Business Suite applications themselves. So what I'm saying here is that from an access perspective, in terms of the types of systems you may want to extract data from, any system that is banded as an SAP Business Suite application, we can extract data from into Alteryx. SAP S/4HANA, we can extract data from into Alteryx. SAP Marketing, we can extract data from into Alteryx. And similarly, a core data warehouse, the system has persisted for a number of years now. SAP BW has a number of different flavors or variants, has different names, SAP BW, BW on HANA, BW for HANA. Again, similar architecture, same way of accessing data from our perspective. So these are also systems that is very easy for us to interact with. And then finally, BPC is quite a newer product, but again, based on similar architecture, so we could also work with BPC. So this is like a partial list of some of the software components or applications that SAP provide, and anything within this box, this blue box here, are systems that we have connected with, we can extract data from, and have a proven track record of working with. On the right-hand side, we have this thing called public cloud. So public cloud really relates to software as a service. If this is not the underlying, I guess the architecture may still be the same, but because it's public cloud, SAP have closed off certain avenues. So if you're working with or looking to move to SAP S/4HANA Cloud, or if you have subsidiaries in organizations, maybe looking to use SAP Business by Design, or the new CRM-based products, Cloud for Sales, Cloud for Service, and so on and so forth. These products require a slightly different approach, and we have the ability to extract data from them. We're in various stages of development with each of these other kind of products, and we'll be making them generally available over the next few months. All right, so let's take a look at a very simple SAP landscape. Dead simple, two systems. On the left-hand side, we have, let's call it the core transactional system. I'll call it ECC just for the sake of using every single variant of the name. So this is your core transactional data system. It's where your master data is stored. It's where your business users are working day in, day out, processing business transactions, updating master data. On the right-hand side, we have the data warehouse, SAP BW, or one of those variants. Okay, and periodically data will be transferred from the core SAP system, and there may be multiple SAP systems within your environments, and that data will be transferred into SAP BW for reporting purposes. So in our world, we have our product called the Alteryx Connector for SAP, and the product itself comprises a number of individual tools. So relevant for the core SAP systems, ECC, S/4HANA, CRM, SCM, so on and so forth, we have 5 core tools. I think that may be of interest to you. The first one is what we refer to as the SAP Table Data Tool. So this is analogous to using the data browser transaction in an SAP system. We'll show you what that looks like a little bit later. But this allows us to access data directly from SAP tables through an application layer. So I can search for a table, I can select the table, I can choose the various fields against that table, I can apply filters to that table, and so on. The SAP Query Tool is quite an interesting one, and the precursor to BW was a product or an area of SAP called SAP Query, and a transaction that may be familiar to some of you is a transaction called SQVI. Again, we'll show you what this looks like a little bit later. But this allowed users to build quite simple queries directly within the SAP system, maybe by joining different tables together, maybe by pulling data from a single table, maybe by pulling data from a logical database. Still very widely used within the SAP community, and we have the ability to extract data from those core SAP systems via this query tool. We also have a BW read tool, which is banned under the core SAP system, and the reason we have this is that in an S/4HANA type of scenario, we are able to extract data from SAP HANA calculation views using our BW read tool. And the bottom 2 tools there, on the left-hand side, we have the SAP report tool. This is colored slightly differently to the other tools. This is what we refer to as one of our more advanced tools. And the primary reason for this is that it does require some installation on an SAP system in order for you to be able to use it. But the report tool, if you were to use it, gives you an awful lot of flexibility. And again, we'll show you this during the demonstration. So if you have SAP T codes, transaction codes that you commonly use to extract data, if you have SAP standard reports or custom reports, then the report tool can be used to extract data from those as well. And the final tool here It's called the SAP document tool, and the document tool allows us to extract attachment data from transactional objects in an SAP system, so sales orders, service requests, these types of things, as well as master data within an SAP system. On the right-hand side, the one primary tool that the majority of our users will make use of is the SAP BW retool, and through that we can execute and access data from SAP query views, SAP BW queries, as well as SAP BW info providers directly if you have a sufficient level of authorization in the system. But like any SAP system, fundamentally the data ultimately reside in tables. So in some cases, you can also make use of our table data tool to extract data directly from those underlying tables. So what does this look like? So on the left-hand side, again, imagine this is our core SAP. On the right-hand side, we have SAP BW. So slightly more complex arrangement on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, then, we have data, what we call our master data, customer data, product data, vendor data, our transaction data, so our sales orders, our financial postings, our purchase orders, our plant maintenance notifications, and so on, all reside in SAP tables. We also have data that relates to the configuration. So configuration data is the data that your internal IT teams or your external consultants would have populated when setting up or upgrading your different systems. So within here, for example, we'll store data such as pricing procedures for the calculation of the value of a sales order, or it could be the different sales document types that we want to use within our system, or it could be configuration that describes the document flow from a maybe a quotation to a sales order to a delivery note to a billing document. Of the data within SAP, core SAP, it's only really the master data tables and the transaction data tables that are relevant for BW. And these are replicated across into the BW environment and populate data within a BW info provider. And I'll provide you with some further definition of these in just a second. And while that data is being passed from one system to the other, certain business logic can be applied to that data. We refer to it as a transformation of data. So certain transformation rules can be applied to data as it's leaving one SAP system and entering the SAP BW system. From our perspective, the BW info provider and the BW query are the most important parts of the BW stack, and the bits that, from a user perspective within Alteryx, are the most commonly accessed objects. But below the info provider level, we have quite a complex arrangement of tables where various critical data about the info provider is stored, as well as some historical data as well. Okay, from our perspective, queries and info providers are the key thing, although we have tools that can access data in all these various elements as well. So let's see how this relates to the tools I've been talking about. So out here on the left-hand side as an outlier, we have our configuration data tables. This data is not typically passed into a BW environment and is best accessed using our SAP table data tool. So if you did need to access data associated with, say, a pricing procedure, then we could use the SAP table data tool to access that data. Similarly, we could use the table data tool to access data from our core customer tables, our core vendor tables, our GL account tables, as well as the underlying transaction tables as well. So this is very commonly used and a very easy way to get data from the system. I guess the one downside to the table data tool is it means that you do need to understand what are the objects I'm looking to get data from within the SAP system. And as SAP never really publishes its data model, you're left to either work out what those tables are, find some way of debugging it, or look for external sources. And there are a lot of sources of data that will help you with that. The SAP query tool, which I mentioned in the introduction, will leverage data in our master data and transaction data tables. The document tool similarly will leverage data in the master data and transaction data tables, as well with the report tool as well, although there may be more business logic applied at the application layer there. Over on the BW side of things, the BW retool, as I mentioned, is the key tool. So again, most of our users will use the BW retool to access data from BW queries. Access to BW info providers is often restricted in different environments. If you do have access to info providers through your SAP authorizations, then you're able to get data directly from there. And similarly, with the tables, we have a table data tool which can access data from these various fact tables, dimension tables, and SID tables if you have a need to do so. And finally, at the very bottom, we have various hierarchy and text type of data that's available to us within the SAP environment, and the BW Read tool can also allow you to access data from those objects as well. So hopefully you can get this idea of an alignment between the different types of systems, the types of objects at a very high level that exist within them, and how our tools can relate to those different objects. So let's take a look at then some of the most important object types. This is not an exhaustive list. We'll give you a flavor for the key ones that probably be most relevant to you. So let's start with the SAP table. The SAP table then contains all the metadata information associated with a particular table, including the field names, the field types, the field length, and so on. And the SAP table contains the actual data rows themselves. And these data could be, as I mentioned previously, it could be master, transactional, or configuration data. And regardless of the SAP system you're working with, it's the fundamental storage area in all SAP systems. The screenshot on the left shows a transaction called SE11, which shows us the technical information about a particular table. So it shows us the field names, the field type, the field length, and so on and so forth. The majority of you will probably never get access to that particular transaction, but if you do, it's quite a useful one to have in your armory. On the right-hand side, we have the data browser. So this is where I have the ability for within SAP to search a particular table, apply some basic filters, and execute an extract of data within the SAP environment. So SE16 is the most commonly used transaction. SE16N is a variant of it. What we do come across a lot is some of our customers will have a Z version of it. So maybe your internal IT organization or SAP team have adapted the standard transactions to meet your particular requirements. And one final point here before we move on. As SAP S/4HANA becomes more prevalent, there'll be a need to access data in those SAP systems. The table data, the SAP Core Data Service or CDS views are also represented as SAP tables within the SAP environment. So we can use the SAP Table Data tool to extract data from CDS views as well. Let's take a look at the info provider definition here. So these are objects that are designed and created within the SAP BW system. Many of these come as standard within the SAP environment. Some you may define yourselves. But what these things are trying to do is address a particular business question. Where are my sales coming from? What's my current billing rate? How many delinquent customers do I have? It's these kind of business questions we're trying to address with the data within the info provider. And as I mentioned in the introduction there, the BW info provider receives data from the transactional SAP systems, be it ECC, CRM, SCM, or S/4HANA. So effectively it acts as a data container, and it does contain within it various business logic and transformations that may be applied to data before it's actually physically stored within the info provider itself. And there's just a couple of screenshots of what they look like through the various SAP transactions. Okay. SAP BW query, that sits one level above. So this is again what you're most likely to be consuming within Alteryx, BW queries or BW query views. So these are designed and created using a piece of SAP software called the BEX Query Designer. And it provides a definition of the data that's to be retrieved from the underlying SAP BW info provider. Mentioned previously that we have access to BW hierarchy data. So in SAP, there's multiple areas where we could possibly have hierarchies: customer hierarchy, product hierarchy, cost center hierarchy, and so on and so forth. So from a reporting perspective, if we can extract and get access to this BW hierarchy data, there's some very interesting aggregations we can perform within Alteryx at a reporting level. The BW hierarchies themselves, they're not associated with every single object within the system. And a particular BW characteristic needs to explicitly be activated for use with hierarchies. In the screenshot here, we can see we have a product characteristic, and that's been activated for use with hierarchies. And where they have been activated for use with hierarchies, then within the ACS and Alteryx, we are able to extract the data associated with it. Similar to hierarchies, we have texts, short text, long text, medium text, embellishment, give context to data you're extracting from excuse me, SAP BW. And in a similar way to the product hierarchy, we have to explicitly activate the characteristic for use with text. And again, we have a product name here, which has been activated for use with text within this environment. Not all objects will have text associated with them in a similar way that not all objects will have hierarchy data associated with them. But if they do, we make it very visible to you within Alteryx. The SAP query I mentioned, so before BW there was SAP query, and it's still very, very widely used today. A good number of our customers use the SAP query, and it provides a user the ability to find the queries quite simply within an SAP environment, and then we're able to consume that data directly from within Alteryx itself. So transactions SQVI, SQ01, SQ02, and SQ03 are associated with SAP query. So if you hear about SAP query, is this kind of thing that we're talking about. And finally here, SAP reports. SAP reports, these could represent transaction codes within the system. So from a reporting perspective, there are a very large number of standard SAP transaction codes that provide data that could be very useful in a reporting context. So the reports themselves are coded within ABAP within SAP, and those reports can then be linked to a particular transaction code. And the transaction code is a link that acts as like a shortcut to the underlying SAP program. Okay, again, quite commonly used in most SAP environments. Okay, so just before I hand over to Sky, here's just a summary, and we provide the decks available to you if you'd like to download it from the meeting here. A summary here of the different types of SAP objects that we can support, along with the Alteryx Connector for SAP tools that we can use to actually retrieve data from those particular objects. Okay, right, Sky, are you ready to present?
Yes, Darren, can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant.
Sorry, I'm just trying to okay, Sky. All right, make you presenter. Okay.
Great, thank you. Thanks very much, and hello everyone. Okay, so just before I launch things in the connector, I'll just quickly bring up the slide that Darren was talking about. For example, we'll start with this system here, the SAP ECC system, and we'll first look how things how data is created within the source system or your SAP ECC system, and then use some of these tools to actually then extract that data back, and then we'll move on to the BW side to look at the BW read tool. Okay, so imagine that you are a functional person who's actually looking deeply into business or customer facing. You have a customer facing role, so you would generally within the SAP system, your SAP screens might look like this. And in this case, you will come in here and say, let's say FB01, which is a shortcut for a program that allows you to create a general ledger entry. So you want to post, let's say, £1,000 against a given account or a general ledger account. You will do that activity right here. You will provide the company code, the amount, and all kinds of references, etc. Eventually, you will save this information by pressing the save button. Now that data is then for example, in the case of financial documents, it's stored in tables such as BKPF and others. So for example, what you're looking here is a document number. So document number is basically a handle against a transaction. So the money paid or money received into an account and so on and so forth. So you can actually track that information against a given document number. So any changes, any creations you make within SAP system via transactions like that one, that information is eventually persisted in the database tables, and you can actually see that here. Now, if you, for example, let's say wants to extract this data from the SAP system directly from the source system, then what you can do is using our tools, you can start by connecting to that SAP system. So in this case, let's say I am going to connect to my IDS system, which is my source ECC system or core component, enterprise core component system. I'll drag this table tool onto the canvas, and I will then type in the same table name that you saw earlier. It is called BKPF, and click on the search button. We'll find the table name, and as we'll select the table, we'll then find all the fields that are sitting within that table. So that's my table. I'll click on the OK button, and then you will see the fields that are listed here. They do match with the fields that we just saw here. For example, remember the company code, the document number, and the fiscal year here. And if you now go back, we should have the same fields listed here as well. So if we switch on the key and tax information, you can see the company code, fiscal year, and other information in here. So that's how these two things relate. So you just simply switch on what fields you want to see in your output based on your desired use case, and then you drag the browse tool onto the canvas. Obviously, you can write that information into a YXDB or sort of more permanent storage like SQL database. Right, this is how that data looks like. The top 200 records in this case, and they're all displayed here in flat tabular format. Now, what else can you do? So let's just take a moment to discover this tool in detail. So obviously, you can extract large amounts of data from this table, which generally is a very large table in most of the organizations, because it, as I said, it holds quite key financial information. So I can set the max records to 0, and by doing so, I can then obviously summon all the data which is sitting in this table. So let's imagine in an ideal world, and I'm really saying ideal world because this table is generally large, you have 1 million records. Now, by setting the packet size to 100,000, we are saying, hey, SAP, get us all the data, however, only in the chunks of 100,000 at a time. So we'll keep on going back and forth to the SAP system until that all that data is extracted out. So this is one way of us helping your SAP system so that it basically gives better performance, and obviously other users can use it at the same time. Now, on top of that, you can apply filters. So for example, if I just literally right click here and say either add a blank filter so that I can edit the value myself, or I can say add new filter. And by doing so, I will bring the help values, so the potential values in this case for the company code, which are again coming from a table within the SAP system. As Darren mentioned, at the end of the day, the reality of the system is everything is within tables. So I can switch on what fields I want to see or what values I want to see in my output. And this is how the filter selection looks like here. I also want to add a financial year. So I can say 2013, let's say. And now if I run the workflow, you will see that the filter criteria that is sent to the SAP system and eventually therefore to the database looks something like this, that get me data from this table where the company code is either this or this or this, and fiscal year is to 2013. So that filter criteria is applied to the database. If the data, however, is more than 100,000, then SAP system, we will keep on going back to the SAP system and keep on asking for the same set of filter criteria, more records, until the database says I have no more data to give you for that criteria. So that is how you apply filters. Now let's say in this case you still have large data volumes to deal with. You can further help your SAP system by switching on the split checkbox. So if I say that, and by doing so, all of a sudden I'm now going to guarantee 3 requests to the SAP system. First request will go for this value alone for financial year 2013, then for this value, and then for finally for this company code. Now let's say for one of these company codes you still have got huge volumes of data. In that case, the packet size will kick in and we'll keep on going for that combination alone until all the data is extracted out from the SAP system. Right. The other things you can do with this tool, just to be very brief but still give you some idea, is that you can bring this filter criteria from an external source such as an Excel file or any other table. So for example, the company codes, you can consider them as your master data, and that master data is sitting physically in a table called T006 in your SAP system, or sorry, T001 in this case. And you can actually bring that data and feed that into this criteria, into this S connection of the table tool. So let's say you first filter out only those company codes that belong to North America, let's say, and you feed that information directly into this table, and then the data that will come out will be only for those company codes. So let me just open up an example just to help you visualize this. So if I say browse here, and let's pick up this example. So what we are doing is, in this case, we are going to connect to an SAP system to get the data from the BKPF table, and I have applied some company code and fiscal year filter criteria here. So imagine that I get 1,000 documents from this table, which has got millions and millions of records, and only for those document numbers which were perhaps created on, let's say, last week, for those company codes and that fiscal year. And then you take that data as a folder for your second table. So you want to join the data between two tables. Now, typically within SAP system, you would have combinations or pairs of tables, as Darren was saying during his presentation, that you will have, for example, in this case, a financial header table. So this is my header table. Now there is a related table called BSAG, which is the line item table. So for example, yes, there is a document number here. So there is a transaction that took place. But if you want to see the details of that transaction, there is a separate table for that holds multiple lines for that that document number that you see. So if you want to put the whole picture together, you will go to that second table. Now in this case, the second table is BSAG, but these two things are actually related on in our example here on the company code, the document number and on fiscal year. So yes, we have applied our filter criteria to narrow down only those document numbers that belong to 1 week for these many fiscal years and for these many company codes. Once that data comes out of here, we'll use that as a filter criteria, as an SQL where clause, and send that to the SAP system and eventually apply to the database system for this table. Now this relationship here between the table 1 and table 2 is mapped onto the S connection. S stands for dynamic selection, and if you look here, this tool is expecting from you these fields: the name, selection, operator, low key, high key. So the field on which you want to apply the filter, do you want to include or exclude the values? What is your operator? What is the low value? What is the high value? And do you want to split your data? So you do want us to make multiple filter requests for you, or just a single request? And that's all we will feed. So from this table, as I said, the bell number, the document number, the company code, and the financial year are actually coming. So the same fields that you see here are coming from these formula tools. Eventually, I'm putting them together, making sure there are no duplicates, and feed them into this table tool here. This request then goes to the database, and only that data that matches that criteria will then travel back from the SAP system. So we are not extracting like millions and millions of records brainlessly and just kind of rejecting them here after that data comes out. No, we do filter that within at the source level itself. So that's the use of this dynamic selection, and you can have really complex workflows built using these. A very quick example I can flash is, if you want to fully automate this process, you can use, for example, our ACS filter tool that can then iterate through this tool here. So for example, the first table tool gives you 1 million records, and if you want to pass that data as a filter criteria into your SAP system, it wouldn't work that way because your SAP system is not built for that kind of selection. So we have built a special tool called ACS filter that will iterate through the values that are coming from here, keep on passing one batch of records to your second table, and then get the data out here, and then keep on doing so until all the data is out. So as you can also see, what we are looking at here is a workflow that we have built and put on the public Alteryx gallery. So what that means, for those people who do not know what Alteryx gallery is, it's a public space. As long as you have Alteryx subscription, you can access that and you can download. In fact, even if you don't have these the access or the subscription yet, I think you can go there, but you can try. And you can download these workflows, and you can start it will be a good starting point or an accelerator to help you reach to the stage where you want to. And they also provide you a lot of definition. So this is just one example of many workflows that we have published there. Okay, so Darren, there is a question flashing there. I'm not sure if you want me to pick that up now, or shall we do that later?
Just carry on, Scott. I'll check the question.
Okay, thank you. Right, so that's our table tool. Now imagine that you don't want to do the joins and you have sort of a query built within the SAP system based on these tables. So that is a platform called SQVI or SQ010203, where the joins are already done by your team within the SAP system. And if you want to hook into that layer, then we have a specialist tool for that as well. So if, for example, I open a workflow which is pre-built. So in this case, I am looking at two tables. As you can see here, the first table is called BUT000. It's a very popular table in the SAP system which holds the customer master data, and then it also has one more table in the join, which is the BUT020, which is again the address table. So the data in this case is basically, or the platform has already got a join between these two tables, and we want to see all the fields listed here. And then these are the filter criteria or filter values that were provided to us, and we just populated the values in them. You can see that you also have the options to split the data request again there. So if you have large volumes of data and if you want to help your SAP system, this is another option. So all you have to do in this case, click on the search button, and then your available queries are listed here. If you want to search something, you can provide the details in there, and you hit the search button, you will get your query out. That will have similar configurations. You will select what you want to see in your output and let it run. Again, this tool also gives you the facility to pass any of this filter criteria dynamically and get the data out. So that's another option for you. Now the third option is the report or the transaction code. So let's say if you are working with an SAP system as a business user, then you will typically have access to transactions such as, for example, this one here. And this transaction is called FBL3, and this is just one of many examples. So you will type in that shortcut program name here, press the enter button, and then you will see a selection screen like this. So this now, rather than asking you sort of great many details, for example, this is the same data, by the way, which we had in this table and a few other tables combined. So if you want to see an amalgamated report, you will say, I want to get all the data where the GL account is this and this, or a range, and the company code this, and I want to see all the open items or the cleared items and so on and so forth. So this is going to now give you a comprehensive view of that data. So either you can populate these details manually, or if you would have had previously saved your details, then you can actually pick that up by what I just did there, by selecting your variant. Variant is basically a shortcut which holds the data that you populated previously in these screens. And now if I click on this iconic execute button, you will see that the SAP system will go to those tables, the underlying tables, and give you a comprehensive overview of that data right here in this screen. There we go. And you can obviously add more fields, and you can again save that as a variant, or sorry, as a layout variant for yourself. So people, those who do not have our tools, they generally then, I mean, this is a really small example. If you have millions and millions of records, they will try and put them into Excel file, and then it becomes cumbersome. And also, yeah, it can't be automated and so on and so forth. So within the ACS connector, we have a tool that actually hooks into that directly. In fact, I have a workflow already pre-built. So this is the same T code that I entered, transaction code or T code, you can call it, and against that T code we have a report. Now all I'm saying is, okay, this is my selection criteria. So these are the same fields that we saw on this screen right here, such as the GL account, company code, and so on and so forth. So if you look here, we got the company code, we got the GL account, and other fields listed here. You can either type the values manually and search for the data, or you can do what I just did there by selecting my previously saved selection criteria, which is also called variant. So this is the name then which is populated, for example, in this case right here. And by simply having that variant name, I'm going to ask the SAP system to give me the data, but when it comes to select the data based on the filter criteria, I'm asking that you use this as a filter criteria. And when I run it, it will give me all the data from the SAP system for my selection criteria, and it is going to look something like this, which is exactly the same as we saw in the SAP system. So that is the SAP report tool. Okay, again, this tool also allows you to pass the data dynamically, you can actually use a table or our table tool to bring some of the information from the source system and feed it here. So you can, as you can see, there's a lot of flexibility to give you or to bring you to that level where you can start to automate your workflows. Okay. So that is, I think, is the end of the SAP ECC. So we have been looking into the SAP ECC system where the data is generated in the first place. Let's just quickly have a look at this SAP document tool. So for example, sometimes what you can do is you can store attachments in your SAP system. So if there's an invoice that was generated, you can attach that against the given customer or the document number and so on and so forth. Now, if you want to see that data, we have a specialist tool for that as well. So let's open an existing workflow. So in this case, we are going to work with this document tool here, and we are looking for a very specific document whose handle is this. And again, this is just sort of a manual example. You can again automate this process. You can get this information directly from the SAP system using our table tool. So let's say you want to get this information for certain customers. So you first look into a table that gives you that customer list, and then it gives you these handles. You feed that information in here, and then eventually you'll start to get your physical documents printed out, well, not printed out, but written to the disk. And then, just to give you a bit of context, the documents in the SAP system are not stored as you see, you and I see on the physical disk on your machine on the operating system. They're actually written in compressed format or hexadecimal format, and as you can see here, we actually read that information out from the SAP system, which is kind of encrypted, and then we use this hex tool to actually put that information together, and eventually we write it to disk. So now if I run this workflow, you will see that that document will be read from the SAP system, and then those bits will be sort of converted back into that document shape and eventually written down to the local desktop here. There we go. And this is how this document looks like. So from a proper document to hexadecimal bits, and then from those back to a proper document again. So if you have a need for this, if you want to see your attachments, etc., you can use this tool. Really well written. We also have one more tool, just quickly mentioning it. If you want to see, for example, some of the information that you typically may write against a customer, let's say, so if you sold an item, a material, etc., and you want to write special notes against that transaction, you can record that information in the SAP system, and then if you want to later retrieve it, you can use this tool. Again, because that information is actually written into compressed format, you can't just literally go into a table and read it. It's like all scrambled and you wouldn't be able to understand it. So this is the specialist tool to do that. And as you can see here, for example, for this material for 358, we had a few notes written to the SAP system, and we can read that directly in here. Okay, so that's our SAP ECC system. So now we will cross the boundary and we'll go to the BW system. So let's imagine that every day or maybe every week, whatever your periodic update is, that this data goes into your BW system for reporting purposes. But as Darren mentioned, this does not go like sort of randomly, like all the tables. If there are 10 tables that hold the master data and transaction data, then you wouldn't actually copy paste those same 10 tables in here. That wouldn't make sense. What you would do is you will have a purpose in mind. So you want to generate reports for your order information, let's say. Then you will first create a structure. That structure is generally referred as info provider. Quite conveniently, you can see the name there. And that structure behind the scenes again has tables. And those tables will then hold that information and make sure that it is basically, if you have two different reports to generate, you don't want to duplicate the same data, so you will have some sort of commonality between multiple info providers, and you will design your model, your database, your BW system in that fashion that it can be reused. So behind that info provider, you will have the fact tables where the numerical numbers or the sales numbers, etc., will be written. And then there are some other dimension and SID tables. Eventually, well, it's also referred as star schema. So basically, these tables are kind of in a sort of a snowflake style, are spread out, but then eventually, when you put them together, you will get the complete picture of that info provider. So this is a sort of a parent or umbrella term that we use, but behind the scenes, these are the tables that actually hold that data together. But when you go to the BW system as a business user, you will hardly ever get access directly to the tables themselves, because that doesn't make sense. You will have to then put this information together, join multiple tables to get the complete picture out. Let's say if you want to get all your sales data out, because that information that you saw there is now spread out in multiple tables. So you will go either to this layer. In fact, even that is less likely. Most likely you will be given access to the BW query itself. Let's just very quickly, we do have a few more minutes. This is how the info provider looks like in the SAP system. So this is now BW system, and this is my order, as you can see here, order cube, an info cube, or an info provider. These terminologies are used kind of vice versa, and so on and so forth. And on the right hand side, you'll see there are dimensions. So basically you can imagine them as facets. And as you can see here, there's an organization, and against the organization, people thought that these are the fields that actually make up an organization in my system. This is the bare minimum information I need about an organization. And then these are the key figures I wanted to see in my reports. So for example, net value in euro, USD, and so on and so forth. And then weight information. So this is how the structure looks like, but this is just, as I said, is just the structure. It's a semantic layer, but behind the scenes it has got those tables which actually properly hold the data together. So let's just say information, and then if you click here, each of the dimensions that you see here, like data package and fact tables, etc., has got its own tables listed here, and those tables actually hold the data together. So when the request comes to your BW system, it goes via this layer. And if required, it will hit all the tables, but definitely at least a few of them. And then that information will be put together, and eventually it will go to the front end. Now, this is just the info cube. As I said, imagine that there are, and in many cases, there are hundreds and hundreds of millions of records sitting in this kind of info cubes if your system is very old. Now, on top of that, you will actually build your queries. So queries are, you can imagine them as your windows. So if you are a business user who have not been in touch with a sort of SAP system before, don't know anything, and if you do make a request, you might mistakenly make a request that actually pulls large amounts of data. So your SAP team would generally, or the BW team would generally build a query on top of that. And they will say, hey, when you ask for data, can you be please more specific and ask the right questions so that we can give you a narrow amount of data rather than asking like a whole lot of data. And that you typically design, that BW query, you design in a tool like this. It's called BW Query Designer. Again, it comes from SAP system. And as you remember, we saw calendar month and all these kind of fields in the info provider there. And we have provided these to natural filters, also referred as variables. So we want to get data, but user has to supply calendar year, and also what transaction type are they interested in. So before they can ask for all the data sitting in that pile, they have to we have forced the users to actually provide this information. If you look at the details tab here, it's a mandatory variable. That means they can't get away without providing a value into this variable here. On the rows and column side, you will see that these are the key figures. Now these are the same key figures we saw a moment ago here, net value and so on and so forth. So we're literally looking at the same information, but it's differently presented. Now, the benefit of going through the BW query layer is that you can do calculations on top. So you can see that these are the key figures we saw in the info provider, but this is a new column altogether. So you can actually do your calculations. You can have a lot of business logic written within the BW query. You can do all sorts of manipulation of the data before it is sent out to the front end. And that is what happens directly in here. Okay, so that's enough about the SAP. Now let's try and relate that back in here. So if I quickly drag this SAP logo on tool onto the canvas, click on the add button, and if we look at our BW system, I'm going to enter my username and password there. Click on the ping servers button and then drag this BW read tool onto the canvas. And I will say I am going to, yes, you can, by the way, hit the BW info provider. This is the same order cube that we were looking at. No, not this one here. You can either go to this layer, or if you have some business logic built in, or you don't have access to the info providers, you can go to the the query which sits on top of that info cube. In fact, you can see right here. This is my query which is built on top of this info provider. Behind the scenes, there are tables sitting behind this info cube. Right, now let's select this, and what you can expect now is those two variables for the fiscal year and transaction type that we just saw moments ago, they will be thrown right here on this screen. Sorry, my internet is running slow. It doesn't take usually that long. Right, so those two values, those two filter values, transaction type and calendar year, will be reflected in Alteryx screen. Oh, that's taking way too long. Oh, finally it came back. And because these are mandatory variables, as you can right click here and you can see it's a variable and it's a mandatory. That's why they are in red. So all I have to do now is populate my values. So for example, I intend to get data for year 2012, where the transaction type is anything greater than hash. So that means give me pretty much everything. And as you can see here, as soon as I populated the values, the screen is going green. So that means all the mandatory variables are now satisfied. So this is now ready for SAP system to accept my query and give me a small chunk of the data that sits behind that info cube. And if I run this, you will see that the data comes out from my database and eventually via SAP application layer, and it's displayed right here. So these are the key figures as we saw in that cube there. This is the calculation field, which was actually not part of the cube, but it was created on the fly. And then this is my I think this is also a calculated key figure. On this side, you will see all the other characteristics like calendar day, when that transaction took place, when that order was placed, in which region, which transaction type, organization, and so on and so forth, and what material did we sell. So that information is now reported here. So that's your BW info provider. Now let's say in some cases you want to not only see the key of a given field, but you also want to see the text. So for example, by default, we bring out the product text or any other text information as long as it is switched on in the query definition itself. Let's say you have large amounts of data and you want to dump all the product keys, which are part of your master data, into separate output, then you can use this T output. So let's just focus on for a moment that we want to get the product keys out. Then you will go here and you can select this parent node itself, not the child node. This child node comes out of the query itself. If you want to dump all the master data for product, select that, and then from this layer we'll select the master data, and this time I will put an output to the text itself. And now if I run this workflow, you will see that the data comes out of the master data text. And you can select more than one field if you have the need, and all that data will be dumped right here. There we go. This is my product information. So as you can see here, we have the internal representation of those keys. In fact, in this case, there's only one sort of representation or format of that product key, and then you have the short, medium, and large text displayed here, and you can then choose what you want to do with this data set. Either join back this data set with the query output on the product key, or just cache it for some other purposes. Now, under the hierarchies output here, you can bring the hierarchical information. So sometimes you will have, for example, hierarchies built for a given field. In fact, it's very typical within the BW system to have hierarchies. In this case, we are going to extract the product hierarchy. Now, if you come across to the SAP system one more time, and if you, for example, double click on this product field, okay, and sorry, this system is running slow. Okay, there we go. So we have the hierarchy information right here, and it's sitting in these tables in this case. Now that hierarchical information from these tables can be extracted directly using our tool. So if I run this workflow now, we will bring that hierarchical information in flat tabular format, and then again you can choose what you want to do with it. So imagine that you are going through a Christmas tree, and right at the top you have the parent node and then a child node that has another child, and then so on and so forth. So it's that kind of information all listed in a flat tabular format. So You can see here we had selected 2 hierarchies for the same field, and therefore we got the 2 hierarchy names there, and we got the parent node, which is the level 1 node, and then all the way up to here. And then finally you have got the leaf node, which in this case contains the actual product keys. So if you follow through any of these product keys, for example this one, it was found at level number 5 that had a parent here, that had a parent here, that had a parent here, and finally the root level node. So the entire parent-child relationship of a given value is also displayed right here in a flat tabular format. And again, you can either create a join on this leaf node column, which contains the product key, with the product key coming out of the data output as well. That will be one use case, or you can slice and dice on a different level in your visualization layer. So that's another use case. So there's a lot more we can talk about, but I hope this has given you a sort of a very high level overview of what this tool can do. So we have now gone into this territory and we have looked how we can get data from these layers. So Darren, I think it's time for us to hand over to you. And
That's great.
yeah, see if any questions.
Thanks, Guy. Yeah, thanks, Guy. Great. Okay, so we've got a couple of minutes left. Let me just flash up our presentation with a couple of useful sources of additional information for you. First source is if
Darren, we have lost you. If you can still hear me.
you're a paid or trial customer, portal. Hello, can you hear me
yes,
again?
you're back again.
Yeah, sorry guys. Yeah, as I was saying, we have a lot of content available in our customer portal. If you're a paid or trial user, you will get access to that customer portal where we have numerous tutorials and videos and how-to guides as to how to use the tools as optimally as possible. I'd also encourage you to take a look at the DVW blog. I'll just flash this up here, particularly in the SAP sort of ECC S/4HANA, the core SAP space. We published quite a lot of content in terms of how to get data from certain tables to align with line of business requirements. So we have a detailed blog here covering off what do we need to do to extract data from GL tables within an SAP system. We have examples of the most important tables to access data from for both inventory management, purchasing, sales, and also finance. So as a starting point, I'd encourage you to take a look at some of the content we have here. It could save you quite a bit of time. And as Sky mentioned earlier, we're reasonably prolific on the Alteryx gallery. So if you do have access to Alteryx gallery, if you just search for DVW within there, you'll see quite a few workflows available to us. These are freely available for you to download as long as you have the ACS installed on your Alteryx Designer. You can make use of them. I think the one we looked at earlier, let me just see, the Sky flashed up, was the general ledger accounting data. We have similar ones focused on sales documents, inventory management, and so on and so forth. So this line or this list of sample workflows is growing all the time, and we found it's quite a good starting point for a lot of customers if they're not massively familiar with the data objects that exist within the SAP system. Okay, so right up against the hour now, so look, I do appreciate the time. I've answered a couple of questions. If there's any questions you'd like to address now, please add them to the chat, or feel free to drop us a line after, and we'll get back to you and respond as quickly as we can. So unless there are any questions, excuse me. No, okay, in which case we'll close the meeting, and I really appreciate your attendance, everyone. Thank you very much.